Luke was a poor cowboy who lived on the edge of a small, dusty town called Red Hollow. His small cabin sat at the bottom of a hill, with only a few wooden fences around it. The paint was faded and the roof leaked whenever it rained. Luke's life was simple. Every day he woke up before sunrise, fed Rusty, his old horse, and went out to work on the few acres of land he owned. Some days were harder than others. Some days he barely had enough to buy bread or fresh water, but Luke never complained. He had learned long ago that life was full of challenges, and he had to face them with patience and courage. One evening, after a long day of fixing fences and repairing the barn, Luke decided to visit Red Hollow's small saloon. It was not a place he usually went. Saloon life was loud, smoky, and full of people who spent money more freely than Luke ever could. But today, something inside him urged him to go. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was a desire to see other faces after a long day alone. He hitched Rusty to the post outside and pushed open the swinging door. Inside, the saloon was alive with noise. Men shouted over card games. The piano played a cheerful tune, and the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the air. A group of cowboys crowded around a table in the corner, cards in hand, laughing and betting heavily. Luke's eyes wandered over the table, and he noticed that the stakes were high. The winner of the next hand would receive a strange prize: the ownership of an abandoned storage unit at the edge of town. Most of the men laughed when Luke approached. "You play cards?" One of them sneered. "Don't you know you're poor?" Luke smiled quietly. "I might be poor, but I can play," he said simply, moving toward the table. The other men laughed harder, thinking this would be an easy win for them. Luke took a deep breath and sat down, trying to hide his nervousness. He had never played much. Most of his life had been spent working with his hands and caring for Rusty, not gambling. But something inside him told him to try. The first hand began. Luke looked at his cards carefully. He remembered what little he knew from watching men play in the past. He played cautiously, not raising the stakes too much. To everyone's surprise, he won. A small cheer came from a few spectators, but most of the men simply smirked, thinking it was beginner's luck. The second hand started. Luke's confidence grew slightly. He studied the faces of the other players, noticing their expressions, their bluffs, and their nervous glances. Slowly, he began to understand the rhythm of the game. By the third hand, Luke had won again. The crowd started murmuring, surprised at the poor cowboy who was quietly taking the table by storm. Hours passed. Luke's winnings grew. The other players grew tense, realizing that this man with simple clothes and rough hands was not as inexperienced as they had thought. By the time the last hand arrived, the entire saloon had quieted, waiting to see what would happen. Luke's heart pounded in his chest. He knew that winning this last hand could change his life, but he tried to remain calm. The dealer dealt the cards carefully, and Luke studied them with steady eyes. He remembered the lessons he had learned that evening. Watch closely, trust your instincts, and never rush. With a quiet nod, he played his cards. The other players raised the stakes, thinking they had him cornered. But Luke stayed calm. One by one, the cards revealed themselves. When the last card was played, Luke had won. A hush fell over the saloon. The other players stared in disbelief. Luke had won. The dealer leaned back and slapped the table with a grin. "Well, I'll be," he said. "The poor cowboy wins the abandoned storage unit. Never thought I'd see the day." Laughter and whispers filled the room. Some laughed at the idea of Luke owning a storage unit, thinking it must be full of junk. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Luke, however, felt a strange mix of excitement and caution. He had never owned anything beyond his small cabin and Rusty. Now he had something that could hold secrets, treasures, or perhaps even trouble. That night, Luke could hardly sleep. He thought about the storage unit and what it might hold. His cabin felt smaller than ever as he imagined a place filled with possibilities. Could there be forgotten tools, old furniture, or treasures hidden for decades? He didn't know, but the thought filled him with hope. He finally drifted to sleep, listening to the soft neighing of Rusty outside and dreaming of what tomorrow might bring. The next morning, Luke woke early, packed a small bag with food, water, and a few simple tools, and prepared Rusty for the journey. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the hills in shades of gold and orange. Luke felt a strange sense of adventure stirring in him. Today he would see what the abandoned storage unit held. The ride to the storage unit was quiet. Birds sang in the trees and the wind whispered through the fields. Luke thought about the men in the saloon and their laughter. He did not feel anger or pride. Instead, he felt calm determination. He had won something unusual, something that could change his life. Now it was time to see what it really meant. When he arrived, the storage unit looked exactly as he had imagined. Old, dusty, and forgotten. The paint was peeling and the door hung slightly off its hinges. The lock had long since rusted and it creaked loudly when Luke pushed it open. A cloud of dust rose into the sunlight and the smell of wood and earth filled his nose. Luke coughed lightly but smiled. This was it. Inside, the unit was filled with piles of boxes, crates, and covered furniture. Most of it looked old and forgotten, but Luke could feel that there was more than meets the eye. He began carefully opening boxes, finding old tools, lanterns, blankets, and letters. Each item told a story. Each item seemed to whisper secrets of the past. Luke's curiosity grew. He realized that the storage unit was not just a collection of junk. It was a place where stories had been left behind, waiting for someone to discover them. Hours passed as Luke explored. He discovered old boots, a broken saddle, and even a small music box that played a soft, tinkling tune. With every item, he imagined the life of the people who had left it behind. Who had used this music box? Who had written the letters? Luke felt a strange connection to the past, as if the storage unit had been waiting for him to arrive. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Luke looked around the unit and realized he had only scratched the surface. There was more to uncover, more mysteries to explore. He felt a thrill of excitement. This unexpected win in a card game had given him not just a storage unit, but a doorway to adventure, curiosity, and perhaps a life very different from the one he had known. Luke smiled and patted Rusty on the neck. Tomorrow he would continue the search. He had no idea what secrets the storage unit held, but he knew one thing. His life had changed in a single night. From a poor cowboy in Red Hollow, he had become the owner of something mysterious and full of possibilities. With a deep breath, Luke led Rusty back home. His mind was alive with thoughts of what might come next. The night sky stretched above, filled with stars, and Luke felt a quiet hope growing in his heart. He had won more than a storage unit. He had won a chance to discover, explore, and perhaps change his life forever. And so, as he lay in his small cabin that night, listening to Rusty snore softly in the stable, Luke dreamed of the adventure that awaited him, knowing that tomorrow would bring the first step into a story he had never imagined. The next morning, Luke woke up before sunrise. The sky was painted with soft pink and orange streaks, and the air smelled fresh after a quiet night. He quickly ate a simple breakfast of bread and cheese, filled his water bottle, and packed a small bag. Inside, he placed a rope, a hammer, some nails, a lantern, and a few rations for Rusty. He knew the storage unit could hold surprises, and he wanted to be ready for anything. Rusty whinnied softly as Luke hitched him to the wagon. The old horse's coat glistened in the morning light, and his hooves clopped softly against the dirt road as they began their ride to the abandoned storage unit. Luke felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had no idea what he would find inside. Some of the boxes in the unit might be full of worthless junk, but something in his heart told him that today's adventure could change his life. The ride took him past the outskirts of Red Hollow, through fields of dry grass swaying in the breeze. Birds flew overhead, and the distant mountains stood tall and silent as if watching him. Luke had always admired the mountains, but today they seemed like the beginning of a new journey. He kept Rusty steady, talking softly to him to keep his spirits calm. When he arrived at the storage unit, he noticed it had a different appearance in the daylight. The peeling paint looked even older, and the door seemed heavier than he remembered. He reached for the handle and gave it a firm push. The rusty hinges groaned loudly, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Luke coughed once, then smiled. The inside of the unit was filled with boxes of all shapes and sizes. Some were stacked neatly while others had toppled over. Blankets and old furniture lay scattered across the floor. The air smelled of wood, dust, and something faintly sweet like old paper. Luke knew that treasures often hide under layers of time, and he was determined to uncover them. He started with a small wooden crate near the corner. The lid was loose and it lifted easily with a little push. Inside, Luke found old tools, each worn from use but still strong. There was a hammer with a cracked wooden handle, a saw with a rusty blade, and a set of nails tied together with twine. Luke carefully examined each tool. They were ordinary, yet he felt that they held a story. Who had used them? What had they built? He set the tools aside, imagining the hands that had worked with them. Next, he opened a box filled with folded blankets and clothing. The fabric was faded, but it was clean and well made. Luke ran his fingers over the material, wondering about the people who had left these items behind. He smiled as he thought about how someone long ago might have cherished these clothes. Carefully, he folded them and stacked them neatly on one side. As he continued exploring, Luke noticed a small wooden chest hidden under a pile of blankets. The chest was dusty and slightly scratched, but it was intact. His heart began to beat faster. There was something different about this chest. He knelt and lifted the lid slowly. Inside, he found a rolled-up piece of paper tied with a thin, faded ribbon. Luke untied the ribbon and carefully unrolled the paper. It was a map. The edges were yellowed and worn, but the markings were clear. Lines led across hills and valleys. Small drawings marked forests and rivers, and a symbol in the center caught his attention. He had never seen this symbol before, but it made him feel that the map was special. He traced the lines with his finger, imagining the journey it promised. The map seemed to point beyond the town, leading into the mountains he had admired for so long. Luke's heart filled with a mix of fear and excitement. He had no idea who had drawn this map or why it had been left in the storage unit. Perhaps it was a guide to treasure, or maybe it led to a place that had been forgotten by time. Either way, Luke knew he had to follow it. Before leaving the unit, Luke carefully examined the rest of the boxes. He found letters written in neat handwriting, some faded with age. The words spoke of hopes, dreams, and stories of people who had lived long ago. One letter mentioned a family that had hidden something valuable in the mountains, hoping that one day someone worthy would find it. Luke's hands trembled slightly as he realized that the map might be the key to this hidden secret. He took one last look around the storage unit. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through cracks in the roof. The place seemed almost alive, as if it had been waiting for him to discover its secrets. Luke felt a wave of determination. He would follow the map, find what it promised, and uncover the stories hidden for decades. Mounting Rusty, Luke secured the map safely under his jacket. The horse seemed to sense his excitement and moved forward with a steady, confident gait. The path beyond Red Hollow was rough, with rocks and hills that made travel slow. Luke stopped often to check the map and ensure they were on the right course. The mountains loomed closer with every mile, their peaks sharp against the sky. Luke felt both small and brave in their presence. Along the way, Luke passed an old abandoned cabin. Its windows were broken and the roof had collapsed in places. Curiosity pulled him closer, and he dismounted Rusty to explore. Inside, he found more remnants of a life long gone: an empty fireplace, a rocking chair covered in dust, and a small wooden table with letters and a few coins still on it. Luke felt a strange connection to the place. It was as if the people who had lived there had left pieces of themselves behind, waiting to be remembered. He carefully picked up the letters, planning to read them later, and left the cabin as quietly as he had entered. The journey was not easy. Rocky paths and sudden streams slowed their progress. Rusty occasionally stumbled on loose stones, and Luke had to help him regain balance. At times the mountains seemed endless, stretching farther than his eyes could see. Yet every obstacle made Luke more determined. He felt that the map had chosen him for a reason, and he was ready to follow it wherever it led. As evening approached, Luke found a small clearing near a stream. He tied Rusty to a tree and set up a simple camp. The sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. Luke cooked a small meal over a fire, thinking about the storage unit and the hidden map. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and excitement. The journey had only just begun, but he already sensed that this adventure would change his life. That night, as Luke lay beneath the stars, he listened to the gentle flow of the stream and the distant call of an owl. He thought about the letters, the tools, and the map he had discovered. Each item was a piece of a larger puzzle, and he was determined to solve it. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of mountains, hidden treasures, and stories waiting to be uncovered. Luke woke before sunrise again, feeling refreshed and ready for the next leg of the journey. The mountain stood tall in the morning light, and the map was ready to guide him. With Rusty by his side, Luke knew that he had entered a world full of mystery and adventure. The abandoned storage unit had given him more than old objects. It had given him hope, curiosity, and a path toward something greater. With a firm grip on the reins, Luke led Rusty toward the mountains. Every step brought new sights and sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant chirping of birds, and the whisper of wind through the valleys. Luke's heart was steady, filled with determination. He did not know what awaited him at the end of the map, but he was ready to face it. The journey to the storage unit had started as a simple curiosity, but now it had become an adventure that could change everything. Luke felt alive, every sense alert, every thought focused on the path ahead. The mountains were more than rocks and trees. They were a gateway to discovery, and Luke was determined to unlock their secrets. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Luke smiled at Rusty. Together, they were ready for the adventure ahead. The map held the promise of mystery, the possibility of treasure, and the thrill of discovery. Luke knew that this journey would test him in ways he had never imagined, but he also knew that he was ready. The abandoned storage unit had given him a new beginning, and Luke was determined to follow it to the very end. Luke and Rusty had been traveling for several days. The mountains grew taller and steeper with every mile, their rocky faces casting long shadows over the winding trails. Luke held the map carefully under his jacket, checking it often. He had followed every mark, every symbol, and every small drawing so far. But now the trail led him into a thick forest at the base of the mountains. The trees were tall and close together, and sunlight barely reached the forest floor. Luke dismounted and let Rusty graze on a small patch of grass near the trail. The forest was quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. Luke's curiosity grew stronger. The map had led him to this remote place for a reason, and he felt that he was getting closer to a hidden secret. He carefully studied the map again, tracing the lines with his finger. There was a small marking of an X near a stream, not far from where he stood. He adjusted his bag and started walking deeper into the forest. The ground was uneven and filled with roots, making the path tricky. Every step made Luke alert, his senses sharp. He looked at the trees and the moss-covered stones, imagining the people who might have walked this trail long ago. He felt as if he were following the footsteps of someone from the past, someone who had hidden something precious. After walking for about an hour, Luke reached the stream marked on the map. The water flowed gently over smooth rocks, and the sunlight created small sparkles on the surface. He paused for a moment to drink some water and give Rusty a rest. As he leaned over the stream, Luke noticed something unusual. A large rock near the water had markings that matched the symbols on his map. His heart began to beat faster. Luke carefully examined the rock. It had carvings that were old and worn but still visible. He traced the lines with his fingers, realizing that they formed a small puzzle. The map had led him to a hidden clue. Luke smiled, feeling a mixture of excitement and determination. He knew that solving this puzzle could bring him closer to the treasure the map promised. He began to work methodically. The symbols on the rock seemed to correspond to small movements he had to make along the stream. Luke followed the instructions, moving stones, pushing aside branches, and listening carefully to the sounds around him. Hours passed as he worked through the puzzle, but he did not give up. Every small step brought him closer to discovering the secret hidden in the forest. Finally, Luke reached a spot where the markings on the rock pointed to a small hollow under the roots of an old tree. The hollow was hidden, almost invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. Luke knelt and peered inside. He saw a small wooden box, its surface worn but intact. Carefully, he pulled the box out of the hollow and placed it on the ground. Rusty nuzzled his shoulder, sensing the excitement in Luke's movements. Luke opened the box slowly. Inside, he found a collection of letters and a rolled-up piece of parchment tied with a ribbon. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the parchment and unrolled it. To his surprise, it was another map, more detailed than the first one. This map showed a path deeper into the mountains with symbols indicating secret caves, hidden paths, and small landmarks. Luke studied the new map carefully. The symbols were different from the ones on the first map, more complex and intricate. He realized that whoever had created this map had wanted to ensure that only someone clever and determined could follow it. Luke felt a surge of pride and excitement. He had solved the first part of the puzzle, and now he had the second key to the hidden secret. The letters in the box told a story. They were written by a family who had lived in Red Hollow many years ago. The family had been kind and hardworking, but they had hidden their treasures to protect them from people who might steal them. The letters spoke of hope, courage, and trust. They described the journey that a worthy person would need to take to find the treasure, and Luke realized that he was now part of that journey. Luke carefully packed the map and letters back into the box. He knew he could not lose them. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the forest. He set up a small camp near the stream, letting Rusty drink and rest. Luke built a small fire and cooked a simple meal. As he ate, he thought about the journey ahead. The mountains would be challenging, and he did not know what dangers might lie ahead, but he felt ready. That night, Luke lay beneath the stars, the new map and letters by his side. The forest was quiet, and the gentle sound of the stream lulled him into a calm state. He thought about the family who had hidden the treasure and felt a deep connection to their story. Their courage and hope had led him to this moment, and he knew he had to honor their trust by continuing the journey. The next morning, Luke woke before sunrise, filled with determination. The forest was still, the air crisp and cool. He packed his supplies, checked the map, and prepared Rusty for the next part of their journey. The path led them deeper into the mountains where the trees grew sparse and the rocks became steeper. Luke felt a thrill of excitement. Every step brought him closer to the hidden secret, and every obstacle reminded him of the courage he needed to succeed. As they climbed higher, Luke noticed the air growing cooler and thinner. The trail became more difficult with loose stones and narrow ledges. He held the map carefully, making sure to follow each symbol and marking. The mountains were beautiful but unforgiving, and Luke knew he had to stay alert. Rusty moved steadily beside him, trusting Luke to guide him safely along the path. At one point, they reached a narrow ridge overlooking a deep valley. The view was breathtaking. The valley below was filled with green trees, a sparkling river, and distant mountains stretching far beyond. Luke paused to catch his breath and to take in the beauty of the landscape. The journey had been difficult, but the reward was worth every step. He knew the treasure he sought was not just gold or jewels. It was also the adventure, the discovery, and the courage he had found within himself. Following the map carefully, Luke and Rusty continued along the ridge. The symbols led them to a small cave entrance hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Luke examined the entrance and noticed faint markings carved into the stone. The markings matched symbols on the map, confirming that they were on the right path. He took a deep breath and stepped inside the cave, holding the lantern high to illuminate the darkness. The cave was cool and quiet. Stalactites hung from the ceiling and small crystals sparkled on the walls. Luke moved carefully, listening to the sounds of dripping water echoing through the chambers. The map indicated a narrow passage further inside, and Luke squeezed through, careful not to disturb the fragile rocks. He felt a mix of excitement and fear, knowing that the next discovery could change everything. Finally, after navigating the twists and turns of the cave, Luke reached a small chamber. In the center was a stone pedestal, and on it rested a small wooden chest. The chest was carved with symbols matching those on the map, and Luke knew this was what he had been searching for. His heart raced as he knelt and opened the chest carefully. Inside, he found a collection of old coins, precious stones, and a few personal items that had belonged to the family who had hidden the treasure. But beyond the material wealth, Luke felt the true reward was the journey itself. He had followed the map, solved the puzzles, and discovered the story of a family who had trusted someone worthy to continue their legacy. Luke smiled and looked around the chamber. The cave was quiet, the crystals sparkling in the lantern light. He knew his adventure was not over. The mountains held more secrets, and the story of the treasure was only beginning. With Rusty by his side, he carefully packed the chest and prepared to leave the cave. As they stepped back into the sunlight, Luke felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had discovered the hidden map, solved its puzzles, and uncovered the first part of the treasure. The mountains stretched before him, full of mysteries waiting to be explored. Luke knew that the journey would continue, but he also knew that he was ready for whatever lay ahead. The adventure that began with a simple win at a card game had grown into something much greater. Luke was no longer just a poor cowboy. He was an explorer, a discoverer, and a part of a story that had begun long before he was born. With Rusty at his side and the map safely in his bag, Luke set off down the mountain trail, ready for the next chapter of his journey. The morning sun rose slowly over the mountains, casting long golden shadows on the trail below. Luke adjusted the bag on his shoulder, making sure the hidden map and the chest of letters were secure. Rusty snorted softly and stretched, ready for the day's journey. Luke took a deep breath, feeling the crisp mountain air fill his lungs. Today would be different. Today, the map would lead him farther than he had ever traveled before, into unknown lands that held secrets and challenges alike. The trail was steep from the beginning. Rocks jutted out from the earth, and loose gravel made Rusty's footing tricky. Luke guided him carefully, speaking in calm, encouraging tones. "Steady, Rusty," he said. "We'll make it through. Just follow me." The old horse obeyed, moving with caution but determination. Luke admired the strength and patience of his companion. Rusty had been with him through thick and thin, and he trusted the horse completely. As they climbed higher, the scenery changed. The forest gave way to rocky cliffs and narrow paths, with sheer drops on either side. Luke had to walk beside Rusty at times, holding his reins tightly to keep him safe. He paused often to check the map, which showed small marks indicating safe paths and landmarks. The map was detailed, but the mountains were still unpredictable. One misstep could lead to a dangerous fall, and Luke moved carefully, always aware of every rock and root beneath him. Around midday, they reached a small plateau. The view was breathtaking. Valleys stretched out below, rivers sparkled like silver ribbons, and distant peaks rose against the horizon. Luke knelt beside Rusty, offering him water from a small pouch. As the horse drank, Luke unpacked a piece of bread for himself. He looked at the map again, tracing the symbols with his finger. The next destination seemed to be a hidden cave further along the mountainside. Before continuing, Luke heard movement in the distance. He looked up and saw a figure walking slowly along the trail. It was a young woman carrying a basket. She had a calm and confident demeanor, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity. She noticed Luke and Rusty and waved. "Hello there," she called. "Are you traveling through the mountains?" Luke smiled and nodded. "Yes, I am. My name is Luke, and you?" "I'm Mara," she replied. "I collect herbs for my village. The mountains are full of plants we need, but some places are tricky to reach. I've been exploring these trails for years." Luke felt a spark of relief. The journey had been lonely, and meeting someone familiar with the mountains could be helpful. "It's dangerous for me alone," Luke said. "I'm following a map, but the paths are difficult. Maybe you could help me." Mara studied the map for a moment and nodded. "I know these mountains well. I can guide you. But the map seems unusual. It looks like it leads to something hidden. Are you sure it's safe?" Luke held the map carefully. "I don't know yet, but I have to find out. It could be a treasure or a story or something important that has been hidden for a long time. I need to follow it." Mara smiled and shrugged. "Then I will come with you. It's better to explore together than alone. I know shortcuts and safer paths, and I can help you read the signs of the mountains." Together, Luke and Mara continued along the trail. The climb became steeper, and they had to cross a narrow bridge of rocks over a rushing stream. Luke led Rusty carefully, with Mara guiding from behind. They moved slowly but steadily, trusting each other. The mountains were full of surprises. They saw wildflowers growing from cracks in the rocks, birds nesting in the cliffs, and even a deer watching them from a distance. As they walked, Luke told Mara about the storage unit and the hidden maps. Mara listened with wide eyes. "That is incredible," she said. "Few people ever find anything like this. You are brave to follow it." Luke smiled faintly. "I didn't plan for this adventure. It started by chance with a card game, but now I can't stop. I have to know where it leads," Mara nodded. "Then we will find it together. Let's keep moving. The map shows a cave just beyond the ridge. We might rest there for the night." They continued climbing. The air grew thinner and the temperature dropped. Luke wrapped a scarf around his neck and Mara adjusted her cloak. The trail became rocky and uneven. At one point, they had to scramble up a steep slope, helping each other and Rusty. The old horse was strong but tired, and Luke patted him gently. "Almost there, boy. Just a little farther." By late afternoon, they reached the cave indicated on the map. It was hidden behind a cluster of large boulders, almost invisible unless someone was looking carefully. Luke examined the entrance. Symbols matching those on the map were carved into the stone, confirming that they had found the right place. Luke and Mara entered the cave cautiously. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of earth and minerals. Stalactites hung from the ceiling and the walls sparkled with tiny crystals. They moved slowly, holding their lanterns high to illuminate the path. The cave twisted and turned, and at times the path was so narrow that Luke had to guide Rusty carefully. After a while, they reached a small chamber deep inside the cave. In the center was a stone pedestal, and on it rested a small chest. The chest looked old but sturdy, carved with the same symbols as the map. Luke's heart raced. He had followed the map through mountains, crossed streams, and climbed dangerous trails, and now he had reached the chest. He knelt beside it and slowly opened the lid. Inside he found gold coins, small jewels, and letters wrapped in a delicate cloth. The letters told stories of a family who had lived in Red Hollow long ago. They had hidden their treasures to protect them, hoping that someone worthy would discover them. Luke carefully lifted the letters, reading them by the lantern light. The words spoke of hope, courage, and trust, and Luke felt a deep connection to the family who had left this legacy. Mara looked around in awe. "This is amazing," she said. "You found something that has been hidden for years. Few people would have made it this far." Luke smiled. It was not just luck. The maps, the storage unit, and the journey. It all led me here. And now we know the story and the treasure. But the adventure is not over. The mountains have more secrets, and I feel there is more to discover. They spent the night in the cave, using the chamber as a safe place to rest. Luke fed Rusty, prepared a simple meal, and read the letters carefully. Each letter told a piece of the family's story, their struggles and their hopes. Luke realized that the true treasure was not just gold and jewels, but the story of a family who had trusted someone worthy to continue their legacy. The next morning, Luke and Mara prepared to leave the cave. The sun rose over the mountains, casting light on the trails ahead. Luke packed the chest and letters carefully, knowing they were precious. Rusty seemed energized, ready to continue the journey. Luke felt a mixture of excitement and determination. The mountains stretched before him, full of challenges and possibilities. The maps had led him this far, and now he understood that the journey was about more than treasure. It was about discovery, courage, and following one's instincts. With Mara by his side and Rusty leading the way, Luke stepped out of the cave. The trail ahead was steep and winding, but he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The mountains were alive with secrets, and Luke was determined to uncover them all. The journey had begun with a card game, but it had grown into something much greater. Luke was no longer just a poor cowboy. He was an explorer, a seeker, and part of a story that had been waiting for him for many years. Together, Luke, Mara, and Rusty set off along the mountain trail, ready for the challenges, discoveries, and adventures that awaited them. The path was long, but Luke felt a sense of hope and courage growing inside him. He knew that this journey would change him forever, and he was ready to face it with determination, wisdom, and the companionship of a loyal friend. Luke, Mara, and Rusty had been traveling through the mountains for several days. The sun rose over the peaks, painting the rocks and valleys in soft golden light. Every step they took brought them closer to the place marked on the hidden map. Luke held the map carefully, checking it at every turn. The symbols led them along narrow ridges, through quiet valleys and past rushing streams. The air grew colder as they climbed higher, and the trails became steeper and more difficult. Rusty moved carefully, sensing the sharp rocks and uneven ground. Luke supported the horse when needed, adjusting the reins and speaking in calm, encouraging words. Mara walked beside them, pointing out landmarks and helping to guide their path. She was familiar with these mountains, but even she was impressed by the precision of the hidden map. After several hours, they reached a small plateau overlooking a deep valley. Below, a river wound through the land like a silver ribbon, and the distant mountains rose like guardians of the secret they sought. Luke paused, taking in the view. His journey had been difficult, but he felt a thrill of excitement. The treasure, the story, and the legacy they were following were all close now. The map led them down a narrow trail that twisted along the side of a cliff. One misstep could have been dangerous, but Luke moved carefully, helping Rusty over tricky rocks and roots. Mara followed closely, offering advice and support. Every sound, the rustle of the wind, the chirping of birds, the distant rushing of water, reminded Luke that they were deep in a world untouched by time. As the day passed, they came to a small grove of trees. The map indicated that the final location was very near. Luke examined the surroundings carefully. The trees were old, their branches twisted and covered in moss. Stones were scattered across the ground, some with faint markings that matched symbols on the map. He knew they were close. His heart began to race with anticipation. At the center of the grove, Luke noticed a large stone partly covered with vines. The map's final symbol pointed directly to it. Luke knelt beside the stone, brushing away leaves and dirt. To his surprise, there was a small hollow underneath. Carefully, he reached inside and felt the surface of a wooden chest. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled it out and placed it on the ground. Mara watched in awe. "This is it," she said softly. "You found the final treasure." Luke nodded. "I think so. Let's see what's inside." He lifted the lid slowly. Inside were gold coins, sparkling jewels, and small, carefully wrapped items. Each piece seemed to tell a story of its own. There were rings, necklaces, and coins from long ago. Luke examined them, marveling at the craftsmanship. He could imagine the family who had hidden these treasures, taking care to protect them for someone worthy to find. But more than the gold and jewels, Luke noticed letters and small personal items wrapped in soft cloth. The letters spoke of courage, hope, and trust. They told the story of a family who had lived in Red Hollow long ago. The family had hidden their treasures to protect them, hoping that someone would find them and understand their story. Luke realized that this was the true value of the treasure, the story, the trust, and the history behind it. He turned to Mara. "It's not just gold and jewels. It's a story that has been waiting for someone to discover it. This family trusted that the right person would follow the map and learn their secret." Mara smiled. "And you did. You showed courage, patience, and curiosity. That is why you were able to find it." Luke carefully packed the letters and valuable items into his bag. He knew that some of the treasure could be shared, but the letters and personal items were precious and had to be preserved. Rusty nuzzled his shoulder as if sensing the importance of the moment. Luke felt a deep connection with the mountains, the forest, and the family whose legacy he had discovered. They spent the night in the grove, setting up a small camp near the chest. Luke fed Rusty and prepared a simple meal. The stars above shone brightly, and the air was filled with the quiet sounds of nature. As Luke read the letters, he felt a sense of pride and gratitude. The journey had been long and difficult, but every step had led him to this moment. He realized that the adventure was as important as the treasure itself. The next morning, Luke, Mara, and Rusty prepared to return to Red Hollow. The journey down the mountains was easier than the climb, but Luke remained cautious. He carefully followed the trails, making sure they did not miss any landmarks. Mara helped guide Rusty along narrow paths, and together, they navigated the mountains safely. As they reached the lower slopes, Luke looked back at the mountains. He felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The hidden map, the storage unit, and the challenges they had faced had all led to this discovery. Luke had started as a poor cowboy who won an abandoned storage unit in a card game. Now he had uncovered a hidden treasure, learned the story of a family long gone, and grown in courage and wisdom along the way. When they finally reached Red Hollow, the townspeople were surprised to see Luke and Mara return. Rumors had spread about the hidden map and the treasure, and many had doubted that anyone could find it. Luke smiled as he dismounted Rusty and carried the chest into his small cabin. He carefully unpacked the letters, coins, and jewels. The townspeople gathered outside, watching in awe as Luke shared the story of the family and the journey that had led him to the treasure. Luke decided to use the treasure to help the town. He built better homes for those in need, repaired the fences and barns, and ensured that no one went hungry. He shared the story of the family whose letters had guided him, teaching the townspeople about courage, trust, and the importance of following one's curiosity. Mara stayed by his side, helping him organize the treasures and share the lessons from the letters. Rusty was happy, grazing peacefully in the fields and enjoying the attention from the children of the town. Luke felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been more than a quest for gold. It had been a journey of discovery, friendship, and hope. In the evenings, Luke would sit by the fire, reading the letters once more. He felt connected to the family who had hidden the treasure, and he knew that their story would live on through him. The mountains, the storage unit, and the hidden maps had changed his life forever. Luke was no longer just a poor cowboy. He was a storyteller, a protector of history, and a source of hope for Red Hollow. The adventure had started with a simple card game, a win that seemed insignificant at first. But that win had led to the storage unit, the hidden maps, and the journey through the mountains. Luke had discovered courage he did not know he had, faced challenges with determination, and shared a treasure that enriched not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. As the sun set over Red Hollow, Luke looked at the mountains in the distance. He felt gratitude for the journey, for the challenges, and for the discoveries he had made. The treasure was more than gold. It was the experience, the stories, and the friendships he had gained. Luke knew that life would never be the same again, and he welcomed the future with hope and courage. The poor cowboy who had once struggled to survive was now a hero in his town. He had learned that curiosity, determination, and kindness could open doors to adventures and discoveries beyond imagination. Luke smiled as he patted Rusty's neck. Together they had followed a hidden map, solved mysteries, and uncovered treasures that would be remembered for generations. Luke's story became a legend in Red Hollow. Children would gather around and listen as he recounted the adventure, the mountains, and the hidden treasure. They learned the lessons of courage, curiosity, and hope. Luke never forgot that it had all started with a simple card game, a strange storage unit, and a willingness to take the first step into the unknown. And so, Luke, Mara, and Rusty lived on in Red Hollow, their lives forever changed by the adventure. The mountains held more secrets, the maps had more stories, and Luke knew that curiosity and courage would always lead to new discoveries. The treasure was not only gold and jewels, it was the journey itself, the lessons learned, and the hope that had grown in Luke's heart.